Maris Calder's empty silver bowl drew laughter before the ceremonial flower test ended. Oren Vale sealed a black seed in amber, hung it at her throat, and declared the widowed Duchess powerless, indebted, and exiled north. 3 days later, Frost Keep rose from the storm like a cracked tooth. Beyond it, an ash field vanished beneath snow. Maris remembered graves there. She stepped down before the wagon stopped. She stripped off one glove and pressed her palm to compacted ground. Cold stabbed through bone. Beneath it, Stonewake found a trembling direction of warmth, and frost melted in a narrow line toward buried moving water. By dusk, a weathered brass chain marked 3 answers: warmth under the east ridge, a dense boundary near salt-white clay, and black stone beneath the southern rise. Memory had given regions, not coordinates. When hungry adults rushed the warm ridge, Ronan planted himself before softening ground. Maris saw the sinkhole line and tore up her plan. Their argument ended with new stakes, wider spacing, and no one digging alone. Maris promised to make the North richer than the crown. Ronan offered protection under a written civilian charter, public measurements, elected stewards, and no permanent military claim. She signed before ink froze. The first charter was only 6 pages, but Ronan challenged every noble habit hidden between its lines. The watch could guard roads, not own tolls. Maris could direct emergency work, not seize fields. Every adult laborer received wages, injury support, and a vote for work stewards. She added public weights and weekly accounts. Ronan read the final clause twice, then said, "Promises survive only when strangers can enforce them." Maris kept that line. Frost Keep had 1 dry hall, 2 intact chimneys, and enough broken roof to bury optimism. Maris chose worker housing before a private chamber. Ronan noticed but did not praise her. He assigned watch crews to brace the beams while she counted blankets, stove stones, and drainage channels. That night, she slept beside the ledger table, boots on, pendant cold against her throat. In her first life, she had begun by defending rank. This time, she defended heat. Nessa Quill arrived carrying 6 crates of roots, 3 blunt knives, and no patience for court magic. At 44, the agronomist had survived enough bad harvests to distrust miracles. She crouched where the warm seam softened the frost and found pale fungal threads binding the soil. Heat alone grows rot, she warned. Heat, drainage, and the right fungus grow food. Maris remembered failed seed beds and handed Nessa authority over every living trial. Stonewake worked only through bare skin on natural stone or compacted earth. Worked floors silenced it. Warm rooms dulled the contrast. After several readings, Maris's fingers lost pain before they lost danger. Ronan timed each contact and ended the survey when her answers began to blur. She resented him for 3 breaths, then saw she had marked 2 conflicting depths. They erased both. Memory might point. Measurement had to decide. Ronan warmed her frost-pale fingers between layers of wool without tenderness or spectacle. "A dead surveyor leaves accurate graves," he said. Maris replied that a cautious marshal could preserve a perfect famine. His amber eyes narrowed, then he shifted the work cycle. Shorter readings, rotating crews, heated stones waiting at every marker. She accepted the correction because it improved the system. He accepted her urgency because the old empty granaries required no argument. The East Ridge shaft descended in broad steps rather than a hungry vertical cut. Nessa checked the soil for sour gas and unstable pockets. Ronan placed ropes, ladders, and a whistle line before allowing the second tier. Maris used Stonewake only at exposed natural walls, tracing pressure that shifted after each layer came away. The water was deeper than she remembered. Changed weather had moved it, or her first life map had always been wrong. Either possibility demanded humility. On the 9th day, a pick struck warm mud and the shaft breathed. Steam rolled upward, carrying iron, salt, and deep stone. The crowd cheered, but Maris heard pressure rising. She ordered everyone back and opened the prepared side trench. Hot water surged into a lined basin instead of exploding through the steps. Ronan looked from basin to her. "Prepared luck," he said, "the only kind I trust." The first water did not become a jeweled fountain. It ran through settling tanks, then beneath a public washroom and laundry floor. Nessa insisted on separate clean and waste channels. Maris gave the bath stewards independent shutoff keys and posted measured heat allotments through carved symbols no collector could alter, with elegant handwriting. Within a week, coughs eased, wool dried faster, and adults stopped spending half a day melting snow. Prosperity began by returning time. Nessa built the first heated bed as a trench roofed with salvage shutters. Warm water channels pass beneath gravel, never touching roots directly. She planted hardy mushrooms in straw blocks and reserved the best soil for seed starts, not luxury herbs. Maris wanted faster expansion. Nessa broke a damp clod in her palm and showed the gray web inside. "Feed the soil before you ask it to feed us." Maris delayed 3 beds and saved all 7 from rot. The first crown invoice arrived before the first mushroom cap. It charged frontier rates for spoiled grain, missing seed, and transport wagons that had never crossed the pass. Maris recognized Oren's structure. Debt large enough to frighten, vague enough to grow, and tied to emergency receivership. She asked Ronan to conceal their output. He refused. "Secrecy protects us today and owns us tomorrow." They agreed instead to publish quantities before the minister could invent them. A week later, the northern test pit folded with a sound like wet cloth tearing. Ronan dragged the last digger beyond the rope as snow and ash vanished into a widening mouth. No one died, but 2 adults broke bones and the warm seam disappeared. Maris had trusted a remembered ridge too soon. She closed every shaft, paid injury support from household silver, and read the charter aloud. The correction cost 11 days and most remaining lamp oil. Nessa found salt clay swelling beneath meltwater. Ronan redesigned access as a shallow gallery with timber ribs. Maris extended readings beyond the tempting heat and located a colder boundary to anchor against. The failed pit became drainage instead of a grave. When work resumed, crews elected a safety steward who could stop any dig, including Maris's. She voted in favor. The first mushrooms rose small and silver beneath the salvage shutters. Nessa refused to harvest them until samples from every bed showed clean growth. Maris watched adults gather around the trench, trying not to hope too visibly. When Nessa finally sliced one, cooked it on a hot stone, and ate first, laughter moved through the ash field. The crop was modest, but it proved winter food could come from knowledge rather than crown seed carts. Proof became edible. They expanded carefully: mushrooms for immediate meals, warm seed beds for spring roots, and a narrow nursery for dye plants. Nessa labeled each channel with carved shapes and kept control beds unheated. The warm plots grew faster, but one overheated row turned yellow overnight. Maris wanted to blame the valve maker. Nessa showed her that the water pressure had shifted after laundry hours. They created a shared heat schedule, making domestic work part of agricultural planning. Coordination mattered. Every 7th day, Maris opened the accounts in Frostkeep's surviving hall. Because many laborers could not read ministerial script, she used shaped tokens for grain, heat, wages, and debt, then matched them to written totals. Ronan invited 2 adults from different crews to recount each tray. Errors were corrected publicly, including Maris's mistaken estimate for timber. The practice embarrassed her for minutes and protected everyone for years. Oren's greatest weapon had always been numbers nobody else could inspect. Ronan still kept watch maps locked by habit. Maris objected when road crews received orders without reasons. He argued that raiders watched supply routes. She argued that secret routes let commanders hide missing wagons. Their compromise separated tactical timing from public costs. Patrol paths stayed sealed for 48 hours, while wages, materials, and toll decisions remained open immediately. Ronan removed his personal seal from the Treasury cabinet. "Correction accepted," he said, as if the words weighed more than apology. Bastion Holt arrived with 30 displaced glassworkers, 2 cracked wagons, and a guild charter burned along one edge. Capital furnaces had closed after Oren's transport company doubled ash prices. Bastion asked for charity only long enough to become useful. Maris showed him a shard from the southern ridge. He turned the black glass beneath the light, found trapped bubbles, and smiled without warmth. "This can become windows," he said, "if your miracle includes fuel, clay, and people allowed to say no." Maris could sense a mineral boundary, but not name what lay on either side. Bastion's trained eye distinguished volcanic glass from useless slag and dangerous fractured pockets. Together, they mapped shallow collection zones, leaving supporting ribs untouched. He rejected the richest-looking face because its cracks ran inward like frozen lightning. Maris felt the pressure difference and confirmed his judgment. Their contract granted the guild a local share, safety votes, and ownership of its tools. No resource right passed through her private estate. The old smithy became Ember Foundry after Bastion lined its furnace with salt clay and rebuilt the chimney from dark pine brick. The first melt foamed green and cracked before cooling. He did not hide the failure. He placed every warped pane on a table and explained how moisture, uneven heat, and ash contamination had ruined it. Maris entered the loss in the public account. By treating failed glass as evidence instead of shame, they found the mixture that held. Nessa discovered the same fungal ash that improved poor soil could filter fine impurities from clay wash. Bastion pretended offense at agriculture entering his furnace, then asked for 3 more baskets. Their humor stayed dry enough to survive winter. The next tiles cooled cloudy but strong. They were not palace crystal. They were better for the north, thick, repairable, and able to hold heat. Orders began with bathhouse vents and greenhouse roofs, not noble mirrors. The furnace crew approved. Bastion proposed transparent thickness gauges so buyers could compare panes without trusting a guild stamp. Maris added standard clay weights molded in public and checked against the brass survey chain. The guild grumbled that honesty would expose every uneven batch. "Then sell the good ones for more and melt the rest again," she answered. Bastion laughed once, loudly. The measuring system later spread to wool bales, salt jars, and preserved mushrooms, turning trust into a practical trade advantage. Installing the first glass roofs required more care than making them. Wind struck the ash fields sideways, and a falling pane could cut through winter layers. Ronan demanded rope cages and halted work when one knot failed inspection. Maris supported him despite the delay. The finished roofs trapped pale sunlight above Nessa's beds and reduced fuel use by a third. Adults gathered inside simply to feel air that did not hurt. Maris counted that warmth as infrastructure, not luxury. Under the smoky panes, mushroom yields doubled, and seed starts survived the longest night. Nessa used waste heat from the bath channels, then returned cooler water to laundry cisterns. Nothing moved in a single straight line. Each use supported another, and each failure had somewhere safer to go. Maris began drawing loops instead of lists. In her first life, Oren had seized isolated wells. A network of modest industries would be harder to own and less dangerous to lose. The bath and laundry became the North's quiet engine. Clean wool fetched better prices. Heated drying racks reduced mold. Wash stewards sold scheduled capacity to caravans and kept a local share for repairs. Ronan soldiers paid the same posted rate as everyone else. When one watch officer tried to skip the queue, Ronan sent him to shovel ash for the laundry crew. Maris hid a smile. Authority became believable when it inconvenienced the people holding it. Everyone noticed. Nessa's dye plants yielded muted colors rather than court brilliance. Black cherry from root bark, restrained rose gold from lichen, and dark pine from mineral-fixed needles. Maris chose consistency over novelty. The laundry heat warmed small dye vats after washing hours, and spent liquid passed through clay beds before reaching the stream. Northern wool stopped arriving in the capital as anonymous gray bundles. Buyers could request measured shades, known weights, and repairable glass packing jars. Color became another measure. Fresh food solved hunger for a day. Preserved food changed the pass. Nessa taught crews to dry mushrooms above waste heat and pack roots in salt clay jars. Maris forbade reducing worker portions to build trade stock. The first surplus belonged to the winter reserve, the second to wages in kind, and only the third could sell. It slowed profit and prevented the familiar cruelty of exporting abundance from hungry ground. Oren's ledgers had never counted that distinction. Worker housing grew along Frostkeep's inner wall. Small rooms, shared kitchens, glazed vents, and drainage beneath every threshold. Maris refused grand facades while roofs still leaked. Ronan insisted that watch families and civilian crews draw rooms through the same lottery. They argued over whether injured workers should receive priority, then wrote that priority into the charter. The North did not become humane because its leaders were kind. It became humane because kindness acquired procedures strangers could invoke. The expanded charter divided resource rights among towns, guilds, and a frontier commons. No group could sell its share without a public vote. Extraction limits changed only after safety review. Ronan's watch protected works, but held no production shares and no council vote. Maris surrendered hereditary claim to new wells, keeping only a temporary administrative stipend. The amber seed at her throat remained the legal token of the exiled title, and, under crown law, the hook Oren meant to seize. At Exile Gate, Oren inspected the quarterly debt chests before sending them north. He was not trying to burn the frontier. Ruin produced no fees, dependence did. His chartered wagons earned on every sack of seed, every delayed pass, and every emergency loan. The receivership waited for default, transferring discovered resources to the crown while his transport contracts remained untouched. Maris understood his plan because she had died inside its final arithmetic. This time, she intended to make the numbers public before they became chains. Oren's debt collectors arrived with polished boots, armed escorts, and claims 3 times the value of the grain delivered. Maris met them before the open ledger table. She acknowledged every verified sack and rejected charges without route logs, seal counts, or witness marks. The collectors threatened immediate seizure of the warm water works. Ronan asked whether she wanted them removed. "No," Maris said. "I want them to stay long enough to hear the total counted correctly." The hall listened. Bastion placed crown weights beside northern glass measures. 2 royal stones were hollowed beneath their brass caps. The discrepancy was small per sack and enormous across a winter. Maris recalculated the food debt in front of workers, stewards, and the collectors themselves. She did not accuse Oren of forging every weight. She documented which shipments used which measures. By sunset, the claimed debt had fallen by a quarter. Evidence gained force because she refused to stretch it farther than it reached. The collectors offered Maris a private settlement. Recognize the full debt, keep personal control of the first well, and receive capital protection. She read the offer aloud. A murmur moved through the hall, not of admiration, but fear. Refusing could close the pass. Accepting would divide her from everyone who had worked. Maris placed the document beneath a blank clay tile so no writing appeared to the crowd and said, "A secret bargain is only a public bill delayed." She sent Oren verified payment for actual grain and a formal dispute for the rest. With it went copies of public measurements signed by work stewards and independent bath merchants. Oren replied that frontier adults lacked standing to challenge Crown accounts. Maris answered with the oldest tax statute she remembered from her estate studies. Anyone assessed by measure could demand the measure witnessed. It did not cancel the debt. It forced the argument into a room where Oren could be seen. The first independent caravan reached the north before Oren could forbid it. Ronan had negotiated escort exchanges with past settlements, while Maris paid in glass fence, preserved food, and dyed wool rather than future mineral rights. The wagons carried lamp oil, timber tools, and seed purchased without Crown credit. Their arrival did not erase debt, but it broke the story that only Oren's wagons could keep people alive. Markets became political when they widened the number of possible refusals. Independent trade exposed new weaknesses. One caravan offered generous coin for exclusive black glass rights, enough to clear half the disputed debt. Maris refused. Selling one buried fortune would make the North rich on paper and helpless in practice. Instead, she limited annual extraction, licensed several buyers, and required each contract to carry local repair obligations. Bastian called it slow money. Maris answered, "Fast wealth is often someone else's ownership arriving early." That refusal preserved bargaining power for everyone. The new road crossed ash slopes that looked solid until wind polished them. Ronan placed snow fences by military instinct. Maris shifted them after Stonewake found shallow, warm pockets beneath two proposed anchors. Neither method was enough alone. They built the route around Stablestone, marked refuge alcoves, and stored food every half-day's travel. The work consumed timber Oren expected them to spend on emergency repairs. Prevention was difficult to display, which made it easy for ministers to call waste. Maris remembered the first great avalanche arriving in late winter. The sky was clear, the date weeks away, and every instinct urged more trade first. Yet the snowpack sounded hollow beneath Ronan's probe. Changed winds had advanced the danger. She closed the upper road despite angry merchants and moved caravans into Frostkeep. Her memory had become less reliable because her success had changed heat, traffic, and snow. Survival now required evidence stronger than nostalgia. She closed it. The mountain broke at noon. Snow folded over the abandoned road, snapped two fences, and struck the refuge wall hard enough to bow its beams. Ronan led rescue crews from below, while Maris used brief Stonewake readings to find warm voids where buried adults might still breathe. The cold drained her quickly. She located 3 pockets, then could no longer feel her knees. Ronan took the chain from her hand and ordered the next team forward. Time narrowed. All but one trapped traveler came out alive. The lost adult had ignored the closure and taken an unmarked shortcut. Maris refused to turn the death into a speech about obedience. She recorded the failure. Patrol spacing had left a gap. Warning symbols were too small, and the refuge door opened outward into drift. Nessa treated frostbite, while Ronan rewrote the rescue plan beside her. Grief became useful only when it changed the next design. The record changed. The avalanche destroyed a month of roadwork and proved the refuge system. Oren's collectors called it evidence of northern incompetence. Independent caravanners sent statements that the closure had saved their teams. Ronan wanted to publish the military weather logs. Maris warned that revealing every patrol pattern invited attack. This time, she accepted limited secrecy. He released the snow observations, refuge records, and closure order without tactical routes. Trust grew less from agreement than from seeing correction travel both directions. Bastion melted damaged greenhouse panes into thick signal lenses for the rebuilt road. The bent brass chain became calibration pieces rather than scrap. Maris approved higher prices for safer caravan glass and lower royalties until the guild recovered. Oren later described the adjustment as favoritism. The public ledger showed why it existed, when it ended, and which workers voted for it. Temporary power was less dangerous when its expiration date could be read by the people paying for it. The heated beds survived because their roofs had been tied low and their drainage channels remained open. Nessa harvested mushrooms through the storm week, proving food could continue while roads failed. She also found mold spreading in one sealed corner, where emergency boards blocked ventilation. Maris ordered part of the crop burned, rather than quietly mixed into rations. Losing food hurt. Hiding contamination would have taught every future steward that good news mattered more than honest, safe truth. After the rescue, numbness lingered in Maris's left hand. She concealed it through one meeting until a cup slipped. Ronan did not scold her. He moved the survey schedule to Nessa's control and asked when sensation returned. "You do not command me," Maris said. "No," he replied. "The charter does. It says dangerous work can be stopped." She hated the precision of her own rule and loved, privately, that he trusted it more than her pride. Rules held. In her first life, the avalanche had come later, after Oren closed the pass. Ronan had died holding that road during the final evacuation, and Maris had frozen in a wagon beyond it. Now the pass remained open, the wells ran, and his death no longer waited on a known date. Relief carried its own terror. Every changed choice erased another false certainty. She could not govern by reenacting memory. She had to build institutions that survived what she no longer knew. Oren responded by accelerating the debt clock. A new decree valued northern payments at crown transport rates, making independent caravans count for less. It was legal only if the frontier remained an emergency dependency, which his own reports declared. He sent inspectors to prove the North unstable, insolvent, and incapable of managing dangerous resources. Oren's plan did not require lies everywhere. It required enough official definitions that every honest northern gain could be priced as failure. Wording mattered. Oren arrived smiling as if exile had been his gift to Maris. He praised the bathhouse, worried aloud about unlicensed heat, and asked whether the watch controlled production. Ronan answered that it controlled nothing outside safety perimeters. Maris offered full access to public accounts and no access to private homes. Oren's eyes paused on the amber pendant. Under Crown law, it represented her hereditary title, its debts, and every resource legally attached to that office. He noticed everything. At Ember Foundry, Oren asked why Bastion had left the richest ridge untouched. Bastion explained the inward fractures. The minister called caution convenient and hinted that Crown engineers could authorize deeper extraction. Later, an inspector offered the guildmaster a private license and debt forgiveness. Bastion reported the offer immediately, then admitted how badly he wanted it. Maris did not demand purity. She changed the contract so guild debts could never be purchased by a resource bidder. Bastion understood. 2 nights after the inspection, the untouched glass face collapsed. Someone had driven narrow wedges beyond the marked line, then removed the tool handles. The failure stopped short of worker housing because Ronan's safety perimeter held. Oren's inspectors declared it careless guild extraction. Bastion's people faced closure, and the receivership report gained its first dramatic exhibit. Maris touched the exposed stone only once. Cold and pressure told her the break had started deeper than any known licensed cut. Bastion offered to resign before the guild was punished. Maris refused the convenient sacrifice. The crew's tools carried dark ash, while the wedge cuts held pale salt clay from the northern stores. Someone had moved between sites. She ordered inventories, shift logs, and boot molds, not arrests. Ronan disliked the delay, but random imprisonment would only prove Oren's claim that the North required military rule. Evidence had to identify action without turning fear into a weapon. Procedure restrained panic. The sabotage team had used watch rope, but the fibers came from avalanche salvage sold publicly. Ronan's own quartermaster system could not narrow the buyer because emergency sales lacked names. He expected Maris to blame military secrecy. Instead, she helped redesign the record, coded buyer marks visible to auditors after 48 hours, preserving immediate safety without erasing accountability. Ronan looked at the broken ridge and said, "You could have won that argument." Maris answered, "Winning it yesterday would not repair tomorrow." Nessa found a rarer clue. The pale clay carried blue fungal threads found only in sealed crown seed crates stored near the inspector's quarters. The organism was harmless but distinctive. Maris documented samples from unopened crates, the wedge cuts, and the storage floor. It linked the sabotage material to crown supplies, not to a named hand. Oren called the finding contamination. Maris agreed contamination was possible and demanded the inspectors preserve every crate for independent review. Samples stayed. Oren offered a second bargain. He would clear the guild if Maris recognized receivership authority over the wells. She asked why innocent workers required her surrender. His smile thinned. Because administration is choosing which truths can be afforded. Maris pushed the seal back. "Then your administration is too expensive." The line traveled through Frostkeep by supper, but she took no comfort from applause. Oren had revealed that the sabotage accusation was leverage, not concern. Applause changed nothing. Searching the inspector's assigned rooms for storage records, Bastion noticed an old wall niche patched with foundry mortar. Inside lay a brass-capped tube bearing Maris's late husband's estate mark. The map within was incomplete, its lower half torn away, but it showed warm water and glass indications recorded years before her exile. A note in his hand named Oren's survey office and warned that frontier data had been removed from public archives. The past had left a measurable seam. The tube also held an unsigned draft addressed to Maris. Her husband had not requested her exile. He had discovered the suppressed survey and intended to warn her that Oren might use their household debt to seize it. He died before sending the letter. Oren had placed the unfinished draft among estate records where its opening lines looked like abandonment. Maris had carried that false wound into death. Truth changed her grief, but granted no inheritance, pardon, or victory. Ronan found her after sunrise and stopped at the threshold. Maris told him only what altered the case. The survey existed before exile. Her husband had tried to expose its suppression, and Oren knew. Ronan did not ask for the private sentences. He said, "Then we verify the map." She almost thanked him for not turning grief into intimacy. Instead, she handed him the torn page and asked for a secure evidence chain. It was the trust she could offer honestly. The old survey was broad and sometimes wrong. One marked spring had cooled. A clay boundary lay farther west. Yet 3 major ridges matched independent Stonewake readings and Bastion's samples. Nessa compared soil notes with fungal zones and confirmed observations no capital clerk could have invented later. Maris copied the map through measured symbols, preserving the damaged original. Regression memory had led them to possibilities. Verification turned possibilities into evidence that strangers could challenge and still reasonably believe. Bastion recognized the survey tube's brass cap as work from his former capital guild. Its maker's grooves dated it before the supposed discovery of northern glass. Oren's office had commissioned identical tubes for restricted resource surveys. The detail did not prove who hid the map, but it proved the Crown had surveyed the frontier years before claiming surprise. Bastion prepared a demonstration using blank replicas, careful to show craft evidence without pretending certainty. Craft memory became legal context. The pendant's legal meaning became urgent. Crown law treated the amber-sealed seed as the body of Maris's exiled hereditary office. If the office defaulted, receivership attached to its lands and resources. Yet the same old law allowed a title holder to surrender the token before judgment, ending the office entirely. Most nobles would never choose that, because they would lose rank, succession, and private claim. Maris saw a door Oren believed pride had locked. Rank itself became evidence. Ronan warned that dissolving the title could leave the North without recognized authority. Maris proposed replacing it immediately with a chartered duchy. Fixed terms, recall rules, divided resource rights, and published accounts. The Crown might refuse recognition. Towns might fear uncertainty. Guilds might prefer her hereditary protection to future elections. "You are designing an office that can remove you," Ronan said. Maris touched the black seed. "An office that cannot remove me belongs to me, not to them." Oren set the receivership deadline for midwinter, when the North would owe more food debt than its crown-valued income. He expected storms to isolate the frontier and his inspector's report to discredit local accounts. Maris requested an open winter council with town, guild, caravan, and crown witnesses. Oren agreed, because refusal would look fearful, and because he believed the law already decided the result. He scheduled it before the market, denying her the season's strongest revenue. Oren welcomed. Before leaving, the collectors tried to seize preserved food as provisional debt payment. Maris produced reserve rules approved under the charter and offered non-essential glass stock instead. Ronan kept the watch behind the civilian stewards, preventing a clash Oren could label rebellion. The collectors took nothing after independent caravanners recorded the quantities and routes. Protecting food without threatening force cost Maris most of the negotiable inventory. The North kept its meals and lost a month of easy cash. Maris reorganized the accounts by 5 modest industries: heat services, food, glass, wool finishing, and road trade. No column looked impressive alone. Together, they paid wages, reserves, maintenance, and verified debt. Bastion audited measures. Nessa audited stores. 2 caravanners later reviewed transport values. Maris removed projected mineral income entirely. The North would defend itself with work already completed, not promises of buried treasure. Oren's receivership depended on making every small success look unrelated. Together, the columns formed resilience. Though the council would meet first, Maris continued building the winter market. Heated paths linked glass-roofed stalls, bath access, wool storage, and caravan yards. Nessa designed food booths around reserve limits. Bastion standardized stall windows. The market was not decoration for a verdict. It was the economy the verdict might destroy. Adults worked, knowing receivership could transfer control within weeks. Maris paid them anyway. Hope without wages was another noble form of theft. Work continued beneath deliberate uncertainty. A fungal blight appeared in 3 mushroom beds just as council preparations began. Nessa isolated the affected trenches and found the same blue threads from crown seed crates, now mixed with a harmful mold. Sabotage was possible, but so was careless transfer during evidence handling. Maris refused accusation. They burned infected straw, closed half the nursery, and moved seed starts to clean clay benches. Food output fell at the worst moment, and their honesty made Oren's insolvency case look stronger. Maris used Stonewake to trace where warm water pressure had shifted beneath the infected beds. The gift could not identify mold, but it found a cracked channel leaking heat into wet clay. She followed the temperature contrast too long, desperate to save the nursery before the council. When Nessa pulled her hand away, Maris could not close her fingers. They repaired the channel and lost 2 more beds. Stonewake answered questions, never the questioner's impatience. The lesson returned. Numbness climbed past Maris's wrist that night. Nessa ordered rest and threatened to tie her to the ledger chair with mushroom twine. Ronan brought no flowers, sympathy, or commands. He placed the elected safety steward's stop token beside her glove. "They used it," he said. Maris realized the crews had halted every Stonewake task without waiting for her approval. The system had protected them from her desperation. It had also protected her from becoming indispensable enough to be dangerous. Unable to survey, Maris audited caravan contracts, while Ronan repaired the weathered brass chain. He admitted he had once believed every noble charter was a prettier order. She admitted she had once believed competent command could substitute for consent. Neither confession sought comfort. They compared mistakes as working material. When their hands reached for the same link, Ronan withdrew first, not from fear, but choice. The restraint warmed her more sharply than the heated stone. Neither looked away. Bastion and Nessa redesigned the nursery channels without Maris. Clay sleeves made leaks visible, glass inspection ports showed sediment, and removable fungal filters prevented contaminated runoff from returning upstream. Their solution cost less than the original hidden channels. Maris approved it from bed and felt the useful discomfort of being unnecessary. A durable system did not prove its leader brilliant. It let other adults improve it while she was absent, ill, disliked, or eventually gone. Others improved it. The next caravan carried no raw glass. It carried finished vents, standardized jars, dyed wool, and preserved food purchased above reserve. Value traveled outward without stripping the ridge bare. In return came tools, oil, and letters from past towns willing to testify about fair measures. Bastion calculated that Oren's transport company still moved more goods in a week than the North did in a month. Maris answered that independence began before dominance, at the first invoice one could refuse. Oren closed the main pass under avalanche authority, citing danger reports Ronan himself had published. The order was legally plausible and timed to trap northern goods before the council. Crown wagons received exemptions. Independent caravans did not. Oren expected Maris either to obey and lose revenue or defy the closure and prove lawlessness. She chose a third route, already marked on her husband's torn survey, a lower ridge path too narrow for heavy crown transport. Oren chose timing. The lower path crossed unstable warm pockets and a narrow cliff shoulder. Maris could sense boundaries only within a limited radius, so every safe section required repeated cold contact. Ronan broke the work into short stations and let civilian stewards cancel each segment. They found no grand road, only enough stable stone for light sledges. The route would never replace the pass. That was its strength. It diversified access without inviting one company to own another trade artery. At the narrowest ravine, Ronan proposed a military rope bridge. Maris refused sole watch control. Bastion designed replaceable glass windscreens and guild-owned anchor plates. The town supplied rope, and caravan groups funded maintenance through posted crossing fees. Ronan accepted a civilian key system that prevented the watch from closing trade without a recorded safety reason. The bridge swayed terribly, looked unimpressive, and carried the first sledges before Oren learned it existed. Shared control held the bridge politically. A sudden storm caught the final sledge halfway across. Ronan wanted to cut the cargo loose. Maris heard a deeper vibration through the anchor stone and realized the load, not the bridge, was shifting. They redistributed the glass crates, moved adults one at a time, and reached the far side before the windscreen shattered. The saved cargo paid for repairs. The recorded near failure changed future load limits. Courage mattered less than knowing exactly what must not be repeated. Independent buyers began requesting northern measures because they could see thickness, volume, and calibration marks. Bastion's transparent balances exposed a pattern. Oren's transport agents deducted road loss even from sealed jars that arrived intact. The amounts matched hidden surcharges in the frontier debt. Maris traced them across 3 years of invoices. It did not erase what the North owed for real goods. It showed that Oren had charged dependents twice, once through price and again through invented transport loss. 3 caravan houses signed non-exclusive winter contracts using northern weights and shared route maintenance. Maris refused a proposal to guarantee their profits from public funds. Ronan supported her, despite knowing the houses could withdraw. Protection is not insurance against every bad decision, he said. The contracts strengthened council testimony because the buyers had independent books and no hereditary loyalty to Maris. Oren could call them greedy, but not her servants. Their self-interest made the evidence stronger, not weaker. Oren adjusted again. He petitioned the capital to classify all northern industries as byproducts of Crown-owned geothermal water. If accepted, heat services, food, glass, wool, and market fees would collapse into one resource under receivership. His argument was elegant. Without the well, none of them existed. Maris's answer had to show interdependence without allowing one input to own every outcome. The council would decide whether infrastructure created public capacity or merely extended crown property. His categories erased labor. Nessa proved the food system did not depend on a single well. Some mushrooms grew in insulated cold beds using compost heat. Seed nurseries could survive at lower yield with stored glass warmth and manual fuel. The well improved resilience. It did not create every root, hand, or technique. Maris documented substitution plans for each industry. A shared tool is not the owner of everyone who directly uses it, she said. The line became the charter's clearest defense. Bastion ran a costly demonstration melt using imported ash and stored fuel, bypassing geothermal preheating. The glass came out rougher and more expensive, but usable. It proved the foundry had independent craft value. Maris entered the extra cost openly instead of hiding it as research. Oren's case depended on calling every northern skill a shadow cast by crown water. The demonstration showed people had transformed heat into institutions, products, and knowledge no receiver could claim to have created. The proposed charter gave the Duchess a fixed 3-year term, subject to recall by towns and guilds. Resource shares belonged to local bodies and the frontier commons. The watch protected roads, enforced safety closures, and held no vote on production. Ronan insisted on one more clause. Emergency command expired automatically after the Winter Council, unless renewed by civilian vote. Maris agreed. Ending his command before their feelings became explicit was not romantic distance. It was deliberately clean governance. A foreign buyer offered enough silver to defeat receivership in exchange for exclusive access to the southern ridge. The sample chest glittered with cut black glass and rose gold coin. Maris remembered how easily a starving frontier could trade tomorrow for supper. She rejected exclusivity and accepted only a small open market order at posted rates. Bastion called her decision financially painful. Pain is not proof of wisdom, she said, but relief is not proof of freedom. The chest closed. Some guild voters feared the charter would divide profits too widely. Bastion wanted stronger tool ownership. Nessa wanted protected food reserves. Town stewards wanted lower heat fees. Maris did not force unity. They negotiated shares until every group disliked something and could explain why. Her own office received administrative funds, but no private resource percentage. The final model was slower than command and stronger than loyalty. It gave Oren fewer personal bargains to offer. Disagreement shaped the design. Their worst argument came over council security. Ronan learned Oren's escorts planned to enter Frostkeep armed. He wanted hidden watch positions inside the chamber. Maris saw a military trap around a civilian vote. She ordered all armed forces outside, including his. Ronan said he could not protect people from beyond stone doors. She answered that a council surrounded by his soldiers would never prove it was free. He left without agreement. Power made the same room unsafe. By morning, Ronan returned with a different plan. The watch would secure roads and outer courtyards, surrender chamber weapons, and train civilian stewards in evacuation routes. Oren's escort would follow the same rules or remain outside. Maris accepted. Neither apologized for the argument. They improved it. Ronan later said, "Trust is not the absence of locked doors. It is knowing who holds the keys and how they lose them." She added key audits to the charter. She agreed. The evacuation rehearsal looked absurd until a stove chimney caught fire during the final run. Civilian stewards cleared the greenhouse lane before the watch arrived. No one was injured, and the flame stayed inside one roof section. Ronan's plan worked better after surrendering direct control. Maris watched him praise the stewards by name and understood why the North trusted him. He protected workers fiercely, but he did not need their dependence to feel important. The lesson arrived early. That night, Ember Foundry's storage room ignited. The fire began beside dry packing straw, not the furnace, and spread toward the audit copies. Maris and Bastion dragged the sealed ledger chest through smoke, while crews opened the new clay dampers. The blaze destroyed finished panes, but not the records. An inspector's brass token lay near the broken window. It could have been planted. Maris bagged it, listed every handler, and refused a public accusation. Records survived the flames. Ronan found rope abrasion on the outer wall, matching the inspector escort's climbing gear. More importantly, the Foundry's visitor log showed 2 escorts missing from their quarters during the fire. Oren claimed they were drinking. Maris requested their expense records and found charges at a Crown Tavern that had closed months earlier. The alibi was manufactured. Still, she framed the evidence carefully. Oren's agents had access, false records, and motive, not yet a witnessed hand on open flame. Heat from the foundry fire softened the amber around Maris's black seed. Bastion noticed its old gate resin carried fine, weathered brass dust, a signature of the cracked mold used at Exile Gate. The receivership packets bore seals supposedly cast from that same official mold 3 years earlier. Yet their amber lacked the dust. The packets had been resealed later. The pendant, meant to mark her powerlessness, became a material standard Oren had not expected her to carefully preserve. Behind the burned storage wall, a heat-cracked brick released the missing half of the suppressed survey. Bastion realized his predecessor had hidden it when Capital Guilds first received secret furnace orders. The complete sheet linked warm aquifers, salt clay, and volcanic glass to Oren's survey office, with transport projections already assigned to his charter company. The plan predated Maris's exile. Receivership had not been emergency policy. It had been the intended harvest. Fire exposed what secrecy had buried. They rehearsed the council case without dramatic speeches. Nessa would prove food independence with control beds, reserve records, and viable seed. Bastion would explain the survey tube, sabotage wedges, false alibis, and resealed amber. Maris would present 5 audited industries and the legal effect of surrendering her title token. Each witness practiced saying what the evidence could not prove. Credibility depended as much on limits as conclusions. Oren had built power by making uncertainty serve him. They would make it visible. Oren entered the Winter Council wearing pearl gray regalia and the calm of a man who had written the rules. He greeted Maris as Duchess Calder, emphasizing the hereditary office he intended to seize. She wore black cherry wool made in the north, with the amber seed at her throat and no ceremonial flowers. Around them sat adult town delegates, guild voters, caravan witnesses, and crown clerks behind unreadable blank tablets. The room's architecture already favored his practiced confidence. At the chamber door, Ronan removed his sword and surrendered the interior keys to civilian stewards. Oren's escort was required to do the same. Ronan told Maris the outer routes were secure, then remained beyond the doors. She felt the absence like missing armor, and recognized it as the point. If the council chose her, it had to do so without his rank pressing on the room. Their last exchange was not reassurance. "Use the law," he said. "We rebuilt it for this." Oren invoked emergency receivership at midday. He described the North as insolvent, unsafe, and dependent on a crown-owned well. Avalanche loss, fungal blight, the glass collapse, and the foundry fire became proof of failed local rule. He valued independent trade below crown rates and counted disputed surcharges as settled debt. His figures were polished, internally consistent, and devastating, if the council accepted every definition he had chosen. His definitions turned every northern cost into evidence for immediate crown control. Maris did not begin with accusation. She separated the 5 industries, showed verified revenue, and subtracted wages, reserves, maintenance, and real food debt. The North was not wealthy by palace standards. It was solvent under witnessed measures. She then replaced crown transport rates with independent caravan contracts signed before the dispute. Oren objected that all value flowed from royal water. Maris placed Nessa's cold bed mushrooms beside the account tokens and called her first witness. Her arithmetic held publicly. Nessa showed viable mushrooms grown without geothermal heat, spring seed preserved through the blight, and reserve records proving the North could survive delayed crown shipments. She explained where warm water improved yield, and where compost, glass, drainage, and skill replaced it. Oren asked whether people would eat less without the well. "Yes," Nessa said. "Dependence is not the same as usefulness. A roof is useful. It does not own the person beneath it." The chamber remembered the distinction. Bastion joined the torn survey halves and explained the brass cap's maker grooves, the extraction wedges, and the false tavern alibi. He showed that Oren's office had mapped glass, clay, and water before Maris's exile, then assigned future transport to Oren's charter company. He did not claim the minister personally struck wedges or lit the foundry. He proved a prepared receivership, agents with access, and sabotage serving the same financial design. Every claim remained open to public inspection. Caravan records followed. Independent books showed intact deliveries charged as road loss, crown closures that exempted Oren's wagons, and northern contracts fulfilled through the lower ridge. The witnesses had profited from trade, which Oren used to question them. Maris agreed they were not saints. Their interest was precisely why matching records mattered. Separate people, keeping separate books for separate reasons, had reached the same totals. Independence made their agreement harder to purchase. Their seals matched their testimony exactly. Oren abandoned courtesy. He argued that disputed seals and old surveys could be reviewed after immediate seizure. The law allowed receivership whenever dangerous resources faced imminent loss. A crown clerk then reported pressure rising at the east well and workers evacuating the bath channels. Oren demanded authority before the chamber doors reopened. Maris understood the timing. His agents had not needed to destroy the aquifer. One engineered emergency could make receivership appear necessary. The chamber's balance shifted toward urgency. A civilian steward brought the valve token, not a military message. Pressure had climbed after an inspection lock was opened upstream. Nessa could manage evacuation, but locating the blockage required Stonewake. Oren said leaving would concede the hearing. Maris placed her 5 account columns under witness seal. "A title that survives by letting people burn deserves to lose," she said, and walked out. The council recessed under civilian keys, denying Oren control of the chamber. No one followed her by command. Steam tore through the east ridge in white columns. Nessa closed the nursery loops and diverted bathwater to cooling basins. Ronan kept the watch on the perimeter, while elected stewards operated every valve. Maris pressed both bare palms to natural stone. Heat blurred direction, pressure hammered through several branches. She could sense rough depth, not exact pipes, and worked from the cold outer boundary inward, while timed crews replaced her at each marker. The ridge groaned beneath them. The blockage lay beneath worked paving, where Stonewake fell silent. Maris traced it from exposed banks and found two possible forks. Her first life memory favored the northern branch, but changed channels made that guess dangerous. Ronan produced the public maintenance log. One sleeve had been replaced after the blight. The southern fork was newer. Maris chose it, ordered a trench outside the pressure line, and found an inspection wedge driven into the sleeve. The maintenance record mattered most. Nessa released the downstream basin in measured stages. The pressure fell without draining the well or flooding worker homes. The damaged sleeve carried the same blue fungal residue as the inspector's seed crates and a stamped crown maintenance wedge. This time, the evidence sat inside a mechanism only authorized inspectors could open. Maris stopped reading before numbness reached her elbows. The safety steward, not Ronan, ordered her hands wrapped. The charter worked under attack. No commander overruled them. Oren's escorts tried to enter Frostkeep during the recess, claiming emergency authority. Ronan met them unarmed beneath the civilian keyboard. He refused access without a council vote and ordered his own watch to remain outside the same line. No sword cleared leather. Anonymous stewards held the doors while caravan witnesses watched. Oren had expected Ronan either to yield or stage a coup. The marshal did neither. He enforced a rule that limited him equally. Nobody crossed. Maris returned with wrapped hands, the inspection wedge, and witnessed pressure logs. Oren called the crisis proof that civilians could not manage the well. Nessa answered that civilians had isolated 5 systems, preserved food beds, protected housing, and restored safe flow before Crown officers entered. The danger came through an authorized inspection lock. Management had not failed. Monopoly had created a single trusted door, and Oren's agents had used it. The council could now compare crisis with response. Oren shifted to law. Whatever his agents had done, Maris's hereditary office still carried verified crown debt. The receiver attached to the title token and all resources under it. He invited the council to punish individual misconduct later, while preserving royal claims now. Maris agreed the debt could not vanish through outrage. Then she asked Bastion to bring the old amber samples and the weathered brass survey chain. He believed rank would keep the trap attached to her. Bastion warmed no seal and damaged no evidence. Under clear glass, he showed weathered brass dust embedded in Maris's Exile Gate amber. The receivership packets claimed the same date and mold, yet carried none. Their outer seals had been cast later. Oren argued clerks sometimes replaced cracked amber. Maris produced the seal register. No replacement recorded, though the packet's debt totals had increased. The receiver was not merely harsh, its foundation had been altered. The seal history became visible. Maris laid out the complete survey and Oren's early transport projections. The North's default had been designed before its first well opened. Inflated seed debt created dependence. Pass closures protected chartered wagons. Receivership captured discoveries after local labor proved them. Oren did not deny seeking efficient crown revenue. He claimed fragmented ownership would waste strategic resources. Maris answered, "Efficiency that counts people only as debt is simply hunger with excellent handwriting." The chamber finally saw the complete mechanism. Then Maris removed the pendant. Under the old exile statute, the amber token embodied her hereditary office, including its attached receiver. She surrendered the title before judgment, renouncing succession, private resource claim, and every privilege Oren expected pride to preserve. The chamber went silent. Without the office, his receiver had no duchy to occupy. The North still owed verified debt, but its towns, guilds, and commons did not become property merely because her title ended. Pride lost leverage. Maris offered the replacement charter, a duchess elected for 3 years, recallable by public vote, accounts published quarterly, resource rights divided among towns, guilds, and the frontier commons, safety closures independently reviewable, the watch barred from production votes. Nessa presented food reserves. Bastion presented guild consent. Caravan witnesses accepted posted tolls. The charter did not ask the council to trust Maris forever. It asked the council to make trust temporary, visible, and removable. The office would answer downward. Oren demanded that the crown reject any government born from a debtor's maneuver. The delegates answered one by one. Verified debt would be repaid under audited rates. Fraudulent surcharges would be suspended. Oren's transport charter would face independent review. The council rejected emergency receivership because insolvency had not been proved and the receiver packets had been altered. Then, by town, guild, caravan, and commons votes, it adopted the chartered Northern Duchy. Oren's certainty failed before the counted votes. When the doors opened, Ronan did not ask whether she had won. He looked at her bare throat and understood what victory had cost. The hereditary Duchess Calder no longer existed. The council ordered Oren's inspectors detained for formal inquiry and froze his transport privileges. But Maris refused collective punishment of crown drivers. Trade would continue under open contracts. Ronan bowed to the new civilian seal, not to her person. Emergency command expired at midnight. The cost remained. The first election followed immediately because the North could not live between authorities. Maris accepted nomination only after recall rules and salary limits were read aloud. Another adult steward also stood. Towns, guilds, and commons voted by separate counted tokens. Maris won a fixed 3-year term, not unanimity. She signed the first order publishing every council account, including the silver she had spent after the sinkhole. At Frost Keep, Ronan surrendered the emergency badge before the deadline. Maris did not renew his command. Civilian stewards assumed heat, market, and road administration. The watch returned to patrol duties. Only after the transfer was witnessed did Ronan ask whether she regretted ending the title. Maris said she regretted needing one woman's sacrifice to expose a bad law. "Then write a better one," he replied. "I did," she said. The watch held its normal election 3 days later. Ronan ran against 2 experienced adults and won on recorded patrol results, worker protections, and his promise not to seek permanent emergency power. Maris cast no special vote and offered no endorsement. When the count ended, he received a 1-year command from the watch itself. Their positions were now separate, limited, and answerable to different publics. Only then did possibility feel clean. The winter market opened under smoky glass and ember lamps. Caravans traded beside green beds, dyed wool, bath steam, and stacked jars. Ronan found Maris after the final toll count. He asked, plainly, whether she wished to begin a courtship with no command over the other. She said yes, then asked whether he intended to negotiate every kiss. Only the first. She closed the distance. It was brief, mutual, and warm enough. They returned to work before anyone could build a legend around the moment. Maris checked reserve prices. Ronan inspected bridge reports. At supper, they shared one bench and disagreed about snow fence spacing. Courtship changed their attention, not their duties. He never turned watch protection into access to her. She never turned office into a claim on his time. The North, having survived grander dangers, treated their restraint as mildly disappointing entertainment. Orrin returned south under audit, not theatrical ruin. His transport charter was suspended, altered debt packets became evidence, and affected frontier accounts were reopened. He argued that the Crown needed centralized supply. Maris agreed supply mattered and submitted open route standards that any carrier could meet. The inquiry could not restore the adults lost in the first life she remembered. It could prevent his method from remaining invisible, which was the justice available to institutions. Bastion softened the surrendered amber and freed the black seed without breaking it. He set the seed at the center of a new charter seal, surrounded by 5 small marks for heat, food, glass, wool, and roads. The old amber became translucent inlay rather than a chain around Maris's neck. The symbol once used to prove she could not bloom a palace flower now certified public accounts and recall notices. By spring, Nessa's nursery held more seed than the North needed. She sold some to past towns at measured rates and kept diverse reserves against blight. Maris helped transplant roots with ink-stained, soil-marked hands. Stonewake remained useful and dangerous. She used it on scheduled surveys with stop tokens and recovery limits. No law made her body public property. The gift belonged within a system, not above one. 1 year later, the North was not rich from a single treasure. Heat services paid bath stewards and reduced fuel use. Mushrooms, roots, and seed beds steadied food. Glass held warmth. Wool carried measured colors. Preserved goods crossed safer roads. Each industry remained modest, answerable, and locally rooted, measured, and repairable. Together, they made famine less able to enter through one locked gate. Nessa directed a cold soil institute owned by growers, not the Duchess. Its control beds still failed sometimes, and those failures were posted beside successful yields. The winter reserve could now cover a closed pass without cutting adult rations. Capital buyers wanted rare mushrooms. Nessa sold ordinary food first, and luxury varieties only after storage targets were met. Maris never had to order her. Ember Foundry employed the displaced guild and trained local adults in repairable panes, clay sleeves, jars, and transparent measures. Bastion's workers elected safety stewards who had stopped production twice that year. Profits recovered faster because injuries did not. The guild paid its share into roads and housing, then kept the rest under its own vote. No palace mirror ever became its main product. Ronan won a second watch election after publishing patrol costs and avalanche closures. He and Maris continued courtship without merging offices, households, or budgets. Some evenings they ate at the market. Some weeks duty kept them apart. Their affection grew in decisions neither could compel. When Ronan disagreed with a council road order, he appealed through the same review used by caravanners and lost. Maris's first annual review included 2 accounting errors, 1 failed drainage contract, and a recall petition that did not reach threshold. She published all of it. The fixed term had not weakened the duchy. It had made criticism cheaper than rebellion. Adults who disliked her could organize, measure, and vote, instead of whispering around a permanent title. She found that more demanding than reverence, and far safer than love. The weathered brass survey chain hung in Frostkeep's public hall, every bent avalanche link preserved. New survey crews checked their instruments against it before entering the fields. Children were not part of the work crews or politics. Trained adults taught other adults how to read heat maps, weights, and safety marks. Knowledge no longer had to arrive wearing a noble seal or military badge. At the next Winter Council, Maris pressed the black seed seal into warm amber inlay and opened the accounts. Outside, glass roofs caught sunrise over green beds and caravan roads. The North had become richer than the Crown in the only sense she trusted. More adults could refuse hunger, secrecy, unsafe work, and ownership disguised as rescue. Beside her, Ronan smiled without standing in her shadow. If you had stood in that winter council, would you have surrendered a hereditary title to keep the land free, or tried to reform it from within? Share your choice and subscribe to Her Second Crown for more complete stories about women who rebuild power on their own terms.